This video will be split into 3 sections. 4 if you count the intro, which is what you're watching now. The 3 sections will be a look into a game that I believe had a fall from grace, yet remained somewhat successful due to a culmination of toxic behavior, bad decisions, and content creators pumping it back to life. And at the end, you'll know why someone may decide to quit Dead by Daylight. Unlike many players of this game, I only started playing it mid-2022 and stopped a year later. However, I gathered enough information about the game to give some constructive feedback and reasons why someone would quit. The game has been continuously successful throughout the years, and while there have been a number of competitors for it, none of them managed to compete well enough to stop behavior from making bad choices. The closest competitor that withstood a chance was VHS, due to the fact that they never spent much money on marketing, and during the time of its release, people were getting sick of Dead by Daylight. And content creators have made videos and streamed the game without ever receiving anything from the developers, to my knowledge. However, they sadly ended up failing. Dowsy, a former Dead by Daylight content creator, has made a video detailing why it could have been a good competitor. So I suggest you watch that if you are interested in seeing what could have been. And I of course will leave a link for it in the description. Back in March 7th, 2023, they released Chapter 27, Tools of Torment, and that's where the game began to confidently make more bad decisions than good. They released a killer and 2 survivors like they've done many times before. This specific killer had an ability that made the game less fun. I believe that the beauty of multiplayer games is an equal footing of back and forth between players, or that the match is quick so that you can move on to the next one. The Skull Merchant has failed on both ends. It failed to make the game quick, and it failed to give survivors a equal footing. Due to its abilities, the Skull Merchant can place 3 drones, and most killers find the 3 closest generators and camp those generators, prompting survivors to either die trying to fix a generator or run away, allowing the killer to kick the generator, which will then regress the progress you made and crush any hopes of you leaving the trial alive or fully sane. Scott Jund, a informative Dead by Daylight content creator, has made a video where he played the Skull Merchant in a game that took over an hour against professional players, which I will also leave a link for it in the description. And of course, the Skull Merchant was found to be annoying to go against. And of course, it took them too long to change the meta. You see, the game was released on June 14th, 2016, and one of the best features they ever added to the game was their endgame collapse. A race against time at the ending of the trial, where the survivors either leave the trial before it's too late, or they end up becoming victims of the entity. And of course, there are perks that block the exit gate, which sometimes leads to hilarious interactions. It was added in 2019. 3 years after many killers and survivors were held hostages, even before hackers started doing it. Behavior to this day takes too long to add simple things to the game. They did a tournament where they brought big content creators like Shroud, Miskiff, and others, and all of them were bombarded with rules that never existed in the game to begin with. For an example, Survivor Rulebook or the Killer Rulebook. But one thing that was of note to me was the fact that Shroud asked a simple question.
I don't even.
Okay.
Is there a search button? Like,
it says it's been retired though,
there's a
so
search
let me
button
just
here?
make sure that you can.
A search bar for perks that was added 7 years later, and they also added auto upgrade to the blood web 7 years later. Simple quality of life changes should not take 7 years to implement, but let's see how deep the rabbit hole goes. The issue with the 3-gen camping has become so prominent that even in 2024, almost a full year later since the release of the Skull Merchant, they are finally getting around to fixing the 3-gen camping situation, and they decided to do that by limiting the number of times a generator can regress. A killer can regress a generator 8 times and no more than 8, and that includes all perks and add-ons that help the killer not worry about gens. especially if that killer is new. One of the mishaps of behavior is making updates and changes based on how they want the game to be played. They completely neglect the playstyle of an individual. If you play a multiplayer game, any multiplayer game, and all you do is sit in a corner and do nothing, then you're pretty much useless to your team, especially if it's an objective-based game, which is exactly what Dead by Daylight is. Yet they make choices based on believing that the killer will always kill and the survivors will always fix generators, which isn't true. I know for a fact that a lot of players enjoy being chased by the killer, so they just don't work on generators, even though it's part of surviving the trial. And when the killer is chasing someone else, they will follow the killer until he chases them, which means there's only 2 survivors working on generators. And sure, you can say if survivors do that, then they will be punished for it. However, I blame the game itself for not adding any sort of feature that punishes an individual for not helping the team. They rather punish all survivors because most individuals who go in with the sole purpose of being chased don't care about losing a match. I also know that not all killers go for pickups right away. They will leave survivors on the ground and try to down all of them, which is more than fair if the killer is trying to go for an adept challenge. It is completely within your right to go for all kills because previously all you had to do to get the adept challenge is double pip, but now you have to get all 4 kills, which I do have a suggestion for. But first, let me give you an example of how a company that I don't like that actually makes good choices that is tailored to an individual playstyle. Activision has been making Call of Duty for years, and I hated every single one. Yet it's a game that I respect for making some choices. The example I'm using for an individual playstyle change is Ghost, a perk that if you use it, then you will not be shown on the minimap. And for years, people would use that perk and sit in the corners in random spots and kill players that move around. So what they decided to do is make the perk inactive if you are standing still for too long, which means that you'll be shown on the map if you decide to sit in a corner and do nothing. So instead of removing an entire perk from the game or nerfing it to the point where it's unusable, Activision decided to tailor the experience based on individual playstyle rather than general playstyle. And in turn, only one player gets punished rather than an entire team. Behavior somehow can't figure that out, but they almost did. A year ago, Behavior released 2 features that were met with horrible responses: Base Kit Unbreakable and Base Kit Mori, which means that if the killer manages to down all 4 survivors without any of them getting up, then he could kill all 4 in one go. And the Base Kit Unbreakable allows you to stand up an infinite amount of times or until you bleed out. This wasn't the smartest choice, but it made for some pretty funny trolling in the PTB and some speedrun records to be broken. Unofficially, I believe. Now, I'm not just shitting on another bad choice. In fact, I want this choice to be back in the game under certain conditions. I want it to be added to another bad choice and turn it into a good one. Another issue Behavior wants to fix is losing teammates in game. You know, the ones that join and leave without doing anything? Well, they made it so when someone quits the game, a bot would take their place and probably be a better teammate than the one who left. I think those bots should have Base Kit Unbreakable. Indulge me for a second in this scenario. You and another player are the last one alive in the trial. You brought an offering for the hatch and you know that it'll spawn in the main building. Your teammate goes down and immediately rage quits. Before the bot update, you would rush to the main building and wait for the hash to spawn. But now, the person will be replaced with a bot, and you wait and wait and wait for them to be picked up and nothing happens. Turns out the killer wants all his 4 kills, which is more than fair. I'm not saying that, oh, killer bad for slugging. No. Not by any means. But doing this means that the game would take longer, removing both the equal footing or a match to be quick. So unless you have the ability to loop a killer or hide from the killer until the bot bleeds out, you most likely will not be surviving the trial. So if that bot has a Base Kit Unbreakable, then the killer would be forced to hook them, otherwise they would be able to get up and possibly fix generators or be bothersome. Maybe you could argue and say that, well, then they'll have 5 perks rather than 4. Well, this is a perfect segue to mention that currently in Dead by Daylight they have an FOV slider, which means that the killer won't necessarily always have to run Shadowborn. So they technically also have 5 perks. Before I go to the next section, I want to make a suggestion. It may be beneficial for the survivors and it may be beneficial for the killer as well. There should be a more clear way to punish individuals who join and quit a match. If someone joins with the sole purpose of being chased and they get down super fast and then they end up rage quitting, that player should be punished. The bot update is not necessarily a bad one. It's only bad in the certain circumstances that the killer that you're facing is going for adept. Therefore, you are forced to stay in a match longer than you need to. So now that I think about it, I have 2 suggestions that may help. Number 1, completely remove the bot update. It's completely useless. Make it so that if someone rage quits the match, then it automatically counts a kill for the killer. That way they don't have to worry about getting every single person or slugging anymore, or even themselves quitting to find people who won't quit. My second suggestion is keep the bots, give them basic and unbreakable, and remove the timer punishment. Hang on a second. Don't come at me yet. Make the punishment more severe for people who rage quit. Give them a chance. Let them rage quit 5 different times before starting to limit their awards for actually completing a match. Give them less score. Give them less blood points. You know, give them less things. Make the punishment not have to wait. That's so ridiculous. I've rage quit matches before. I don't like it, but I've rage quit matches before, and all I had to do was wait 15 seconds and then a minute. Oh man. Oh shucks. I can't play the game for a whole minute. I understand that the timer increases the more times you rage quit, but if there was like there was like a more severe punishment, I wouldn't rage quit, and I don't think anybody else would rage quit. Before I go to the next section of this video, here's every change that I consider to be bad that happened. Every medkit heals you once no matter what, so all the purple medkits you've been hoarding are meaningless. Healing boon changed so they don't work on the person who set them up. Also, with this nerf, running boons became a rarity. If you find someone running a boon, then shake their hand, cause that player is holding hope for nothing. Dead Hard changed so much, I don't even know how it works now. Also, boons were introduced 6 years after the game released. I thought it was important to bring up the fact that the last time they added any new mechanic to Survivor was 6 years after the game was released, and they haven't added anything new yet. There's also 5 boons in total. There definitely should have been more. Hook grabs have been removed. Anti-face camping measures added. It's well known that multiplayer game communities vary from being toxic to being friendly. You have games like Siege where everyone is sexist, you got Call of Duty where everybody's racist, and you got Rust where everyone is racist, sexist, and homophobic. Damn, Rust is collecting all Infinity Gems. But when it comes to Dead by Daylight, it's somehow worse. I grew up playing online games, and I've been called everything under the sun. The amount of racist comments I received from Dead by Daylight was 1, and it was after a 12-hour stream, and at that point I didn't really care and just made fun of the guy for basically calling me the wrong racial slur on multiple occasions. Now, I'm not saying these insults are better, not by a long shot. The racism and homophobia and sexism are all worst for sure, and what I said earlier was a joke, obviously. However, some of the popular videos that involve Dead by Daylight on YouTube is toxic player this or toxic streamer that. I can't always blame everything on behavior, so this domino falls on the community. I've seen countless of videos of either killer or survivor acting in an entitled or toxic way, and while behavior is actively trying to fix these issues they complain about, I find the issues were created by its own community. Slugging, camping, and tunneling. Rules that never existed in the game. But I commend behavior for actually wanting to listen to its community and fix these issues. I'm glad they decided to address these issues 8 years since the release. But the toxicity aspect extends beyond Dead by Daylight. It's spread out to Twitch and Twitter or any social media that allows for sharing your opinion. If you say something or do something that not everyone agrees with, then you'll be met with hate. And I wish I was talking about being called something racist or homophobic. Somehow I prefer those over what Dead by Daylight community does. I am a victim of this emotional confusion myself, because when I was playing Killer and finished a match too quickly, the survivors then would come to my chat and simply make me feel bad for finishing the game too quick. Another moment, someone just said they'll scalp my mother, which I'm gonna take time to respond to now. No. Don't. But beyond my own personal experience, no one should receive hate for breaking rules that never existed in the game in the first place. You can say that these rules were made by players to make the game more fun for everyone, and I actually agree, but just because you'll follow the rules doesn't mean everyone has to. And if they don't, then it's not within your right to complain or act in a toxic way towards the player, just because they don't care about rules that don't punish them. Yes, if they are being followed, then the game is more fun. However, I don't believe the community should get so desperate when the company itself takes too long to figure ways to implement these rules. And when they do add these rules, it's mostly on survivor side. So the killer feels the survivors are being held by their hand. Yet they don't add something for killer. So some killers become more resentful and thus created more toxicity. Still not blaming behavior for this, it's mostly personal issues. There is a very simple way to combat this, is to simply just add no collision to the unhooked survivor. That way the survivor is not blocking the killer with their immunity, nor is the killer body blocking the survivors to down them again. Of course, if they decide to implement the no collision, then it'll be added in 2026 if the game survives that long. Several content creators have already decided to either quit the game or even slow down on creating content revolving around Dead by Daylight, and they're not really to blame. The domino here falls on behavior for their lack of communication or actually listening to any feedback from these creators. Even when they are publicly addressing the developers, they're still being ignored. If these content creators like Otstarva or Scott Jones, who have been seen publicly in Reddit AMAs or even on Twitter or even their own YouTube channels, suggesting or advising these developers on what to improve or what they can do to fix a lot of these issues, but everything they say seems to fall on deaf ears. And I'm almost glad that Dowsy saw all of this coming and left Dead by Daylight long ago. He lost enjoyment out of it, and he was, in my personal opinion, one of the best storytellers in Dead by Daylight. His hardcore series were really captivating and enjoyable to watch. From the editing to the commentating and of course the thumbnails, everything was just fantastic work. It's a shame that I won't get to see something that well made on a game that rarely appreciated or acknowledged the advice these creators gave. And yeah, I know I was glazing Dowsy a bit, but he earned his flowers. But since we are on the topic of content creators being ignored, let me mention that Scott Junt, Otstarva, Spook and Jukes all have proven most of their updates or releases can easily be exploited. Scott Junt proved that these Skull Merchant matches can either go from 10 minutes to an entire hour while he was playing against professionals. Keep that in mind. Spook and Jukes proved that their new anti-face camp measures are useless because he still manages to do it with his Bubba. And Otstarva, honestly, you know what? I just feel bad for Otstarva because the man sometimes gets hate for changes and people think it's his fault. He also decided to slow down on Dead by Daylight content. And honestly, I hope all these people are successful in their future endeavors no matter what they do or play. Hopefully they don't have to rely on Dead by Daylight for their careers. Seriously, if they all decide to quit, if every Dead by Daylight content creator was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do something else, I hope they're all remain successful or even more successful actually. If behavior won't actually listen to people who play the game on a daily basis and know the ins and outs better than most developers, then I have no hope for future in the fog. Finally, we have the domino that falls on me. I stopped playing Dead by Daylight for the reasons I've mentioned. Their lack of communication is unbearable. The fact they make changes based on a spreadsheet of most used perks to least used perks. The fact that most changes are meaningless or just not needed. The fact that they failed with Tools of Torment and right after that they released another futuristic chapter. The fact that when both of those chapters failed, they bought IPs and both of those IPs ended up underperforming. The fact that they brought back the Stranger Things DLC and they removed several perks from the common pool, which means you need to own the DLC to have those perks again. Every day and every update, there are less and less things to be excited about. Now, I will say that I did have a wonderful time in the year that I spent playing the game. I started playing the game back when Dead Hard used to give you distance. Before that changed, before it started giving you endurance. Since then, every update seems to have been questionable. I mean, at this point, there is one perk that I can think of that have become completely obsolete. Besides all the boons combined together, the one perk that I think have become completely obsolete and that I rarely ever see has become borrowed time because of their update when they added the endurance status effect and the haste effect to 10 seconds. Borrowed time used to do that for you, but now they changed that so it's a base thing. So everybody has based borrowed time. With the perk borrowed time, it simply increases the duration by 10 seconds. Now, in retrospect, that's not the worst, but at the same time, running borrowed time, if you are playing with friends or anything, running borrowed time is completely obsolete. It's out of the question. You might as well just run 3 perks at this point. But I did enjoy the game. I have pretty much done a lot of things in the game. I've gone on win streaks on killer side. I've gone on win streaks on survivor side. I've made a lot of perk combinations. I've done all sorts of builds. I have an unintentional speed run record. It's not really much of an impressive record. I think I'm number 26 or 27. I really haven't. You know what? Hold on, let me check. Apparently I'm number 28 currently with 3 minutes and 26 seconds on Oni a year ago. Besides that, I've also done some pretty decent challenges. Like I've escaped out of a trial using nothing but one hand. That video is still up on my channel if you want to check it out. With every update, I've always looked at the chapters and what was going to be released so that I can make different perk combinations. I've done a lot of silly things, you would say, to stop myself from being bored or be tired of the repetitiveness of the game. And by the time you're watching this, I am probably going to be streaming Dead by Daylight over on Twitch for the last time before I completely uninstall the game. So make sure you drop by and give me your thoughts. Let me know what's up. And just like in Dead by Daylight fashion, I was supposed to drop this video a year ago.